Good morning, everybody. Going to go ahead and get started here. Chair Jacobs is going to be a little bit late, so we're going to get started. So let's begin with roll call.
Chair Jacobs, Vice Chair Baker,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Caballero, Planning Commissioner Chagaris,
Here.
Commissioner Lee,
Here.
Councilmember Kopak,
Here.
Commissioner Valentine.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? None? Okay. Approval of the minutes. Are there any motions?
Move approval. Second.
Minutes are approved. City and county managers priority items. Or I'm sorry, announcements.
Good morning. I would like to take a moment of personal privilege and introduce Erlene Thomas to you all. Many of you know her. She has recently been promoted to assistant director and will be taking over the majority of the portfolio that Assistant Director Bo Dobrinsky handled. Bo is moving over to take care of the portfolio that our recently retired Assistant Director Grace Smith had. So you may be seeing Erlene from time to time. I just want to congratulate her and let you all know of her in this new role.
Thank you. Congratulations, Erlene. City and county managers priority items.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. The city does not have any priority items this morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And none from the county.
All right, great. Thank you all. All right, we're going to move into, we are ahead of schedule, election of officers. Yes.
So normally someone will go ahead and make a motion. I think we typically do chair first and then we'll do vice chair.
Any nominations for chair?
I move that Nate Baker be the chair of the committee.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All against? Any motions for vice chair?
Make a motion that Councilwoman Caballero, Mayor Pro Tem.
Should be the county.
County, should be county?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, city, okay.
So normally we have got, the practice has been, it's not codified, but the practice has been whoever, it rotates so that everyone gets a chance. So I think it would be you next for the county. So if you were following that practice, it would be
Make a
Dr.
motion that Dr. Lee, you made vice chair of the committee.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against? All right. Congratulations to us. All right, moving on. So let's go with our first item 6 on the agenda, access to parks, open space, trails, and recreation.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jay Butts, planner with the Planning Development Department. Glad to be here to present to you all for the first time. I'll be giving a presentation on access to parks, open space, trails, and recreation. So essentially, we're here to provide an update about a comp plan policy. And the comp plan policy 103 reads, ensure that all residents living within the urban growth boundary are within a safe 10-minute walking distance to public parkland. Along with the comp plan policy, there were implementation items that were created to essentially achieve those policies, and the action items support those policies. And this implementation item reads, for policy 103, work with Durham Parks and Recreation to define and complete the following. So essentially want to have a specific criteria of what is a safe 10-minute walk, and DPR has provided that outline and that definition. And next, want to have a specific qualification of what qualifies as public parkland. And lastly, DPR has created a public parkland walkshed map. And I'll turn it over to Austin.
Good morning, everyone. Austin Bowman. I'm a senior planner with Durham Parks and Rec, and I've been working on this item with Jay. So I'm going to walk you through these criteria that we worked together to come up with. To do this, we looked at both the citywide comprehensive plan as well as the recently adopted Durham Parks and Recreation Comprehensive System Plan to create a definition that we can use to help us assess this policy and progress that we're making as we're implementing the comp plan. So for what qualifies as public parkland, this is a little different. If you'll remember, the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive System Plan looks solely at DPR facilities and parks, right? Because we're only responsible for those. We can only affect change within our own system. But for this item, we kind of went with a broader definition because, as you all are well aware, there are a lot of players in the city and the county that are also providing access to public parkland. So to qualify as public parkland, there must be consistent public access. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be open every day, 24 hours a day, but that the access is posted, that people are well aware, and that it's consistent. The parkland must be operated and maintained by a public agency or a nonprofit. And non-developed parkland must have public plans for development and include public access. And when we say development, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to put a parking lot in and a playground, but just that there is some intentionality between making that publicly accessible recreational land. In the context specifically of DPR, we're really focused on two main types of land. Our current park space, which is land that we control that's already been developed and it's currently maintained by DPR and our partners, and future potential park space, that's land that can and will be developed and maintained by DPR as a park in the future. This is not an exhaustive inventory. That doesn't provide an exhaustive inventory of land. There are other agencies in the county, such as state parks, Triangle Land Conservancy, River Association, Ellerby Creek Watershed Association, among others that are providing accessible open space. But DPR's focus is really on those two areas. So criteria for a safe 10-minute walk, and there's actually a bullet that fell off of here that is in your memo. So the first thing we're looking at is traffic volume and speed, making sure that the roads that people are walking along to access our parks are comfortable and that people feel safe, even if there is supportive infrastructure. And a lot of that comes down to traffic volume and speed. Availability of pedestrian safety measures such as signalized crosswalks, bike lanes, and other pedestrian-oriented roadway interventions. That could be speed tables, other traffic calming measures. And then the bullet that fell off of here, which is a pretty important one, direct access from the right-of-way into the park via a sidewalk, trail, or path. So those parks need to be directly accessible, or that parkland needs to be directly accessible from the public right-of-way. One thing we did want to take this opportunity to highlight is since the citywide comprehensive plan was adopted, the Durham Parks and Recreations System Plan was adopted, and that plan has slightly different access standards than just the global 10-minute walk for all residents. And part of that is born out of the fact that the Parks Comprehensive Plan is a 10-year plan, right? So it's a shorter planning horizon than the citywide comprehensive plan. So it has to be a little more cognizant and in tune with the operating realities that we have. I think the other piece of it is recognition that the city is currently not in a place where a 10-minute walk for all residents is really feasible. It's not just a question of parkland. We could always add more parks, but there's a huge component to this, which is supportive infrastructure to get people to parks, bike lanes, sidewalks, transit stops, transit routes, right? So it's not just about pouring new parks into the system. It's about trying to find some alignment with providing infrastructure to get to existing parks and making sure infrastructure is in place to get to those new parks so that it's actually achieving this goal. So the standards that are in the adopted Parks and Recreation System Plan are on your screen. So it's based on growth patterns and definitions. So in urban areas, that would be our urban core. The goal is a 10-minute walk. In a suburban area, that would be the access standard is 10-minute drive. In our rural areas, it's a 15-minute drive. So the rural areas would really be pretty much everything outside of the urban growth boundary. And part of the reasoning for that is if you look, for example, at, let's say, the Eno River State Park, if you map what's accessible within a 10-minute walk to any entrance to the Eno River State Park, there are barely any residents that live within a 10-minute walk, but there are thousands of residents that live within a 15-minute drive. And that park wasn't necessarily designed with the intention that it would be a walkable destination versus vehicular accessible. So just real quick, something that Jay and I are working on, and we're also working with our partners in the county, the walkshed map that is in your memo does not include it was brought to our attention, it does not include some lands that are publicly accessible and would meet the criteria that are operating with the county. So we're working with the county as well as our other partners to get those lands in our inventory and update that walkshed map. I can tell you most of those additional facilities are in more rural areas of the city, so it does not significantly expand our walkshed area. The walkable area is pretty much along the main access road. It doesn't reach into neighborhoods. And some of those are on the screen for you. So I guess the so what here is we're trying to get to a place where we're being a little more nuanced, and that level of service and access to parks is going to be impacted the further out you travel from the urban core of the city, at least in the short term, right? We're not in a place where it's necessarily realistic to expect those high levels of access in the more rural and sparse parts of the city and the county. The 10-minute walk is more achievable within the urban growth boundary. And we're also looking as part of the open space plan process that'll be kicking off soon to help define the role non-developed open space can play in expanding access to public parkland beyond traditional parks. We recognize that there are multiple ways to go about this. There are multiple facilities that we can provide access to that offer different experiences, and we want to make sure that we're offering a diversity of experiences, but also offering experiences that are true to the community that they are in and the land that those experiences will be had on. So I think that's it. And then Jay and I can take any questions you have.
Thank you both so much. Any questions, comments?
Thank you. And I first want to apologize for being late. I don't know how much information, Sarah.
Not sure.
Okay. I got locked out of my house this morning. And the key was not where it was supposed to be. So I apologize. And so I missed the election. I wanted just to take a point of privilege to say congratulations to our new chair and vice chair. And I also just wanted to thank everyone for the past year of having the honor of serving as chair, and to say thank you to all of the members of the commission for, I think, really important conversations that we've had over the past year. I appreciate everyone's input, and also just to thank the staff, because you all have been amazing. And there are so many requests that we have given you for information that were not on the agenda that you came back with right away. So thank you so much. Aaron, I also want to say welcome back to you, seeing you sitting over there. I So I have a number, this is great. I do have a number of questions. So this will be adopted into the comp plan. I mean, I'm sorry, into the, how will this be adopted? Like in the UDO will, for instance, when there are new developments being planned or, you know, things like that, like how just on a practical level will this have an impact?
Sure. So we've been talking with Sarah, and I think one immediate or short-term step is to bring some alignment between the park system plan and the comp plan, which would entail basically taking our access standard that is more newly adopted and moving that over to the comprehensive plan so those things are no longer in conflict with one another. I can't speak much to how we could codify this. I'm not entirely sure that we could. Sarah?
Yeah, I think where the trying to practically apply this in developments is going to come into play is through a new process that we're trying to set up where Parks and Rec is going to be looking at as development cases come through, like, is this a prime location where we are looking to, you know, fill in the gap, where their plan has identified a need for a space. They're working through that process now, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. And I think maybe we can have you back when that
Sure.
process is solidified.
Yeah. To Sarah's point, we are working on a what will be hopefully a publicly accessible tool, meaning the public can access it, developers can access it. You'll all have access that kind of articulates based off of the comprehensive plan and the park system plan where are high, medium, and low priority areas for investment. That material is making its way through the Recreation Advisory Commission, hopefully this month or next month. And we are happy to come back and present that once it's been endorsed.
Okay, because I mean, that's to me is what one of the key parts is, right? If we can incorporate this into the comp plan and then in the UDO, so that when projects come up, this is part of what happens. And I know we have amazing, I'm our liaison to BPAC, and just, you know, they have a development review, very active. So just making that part of what we do. The other question I have is, you know, when looking at the criteria, what comes to mind is, well, if you're talking about access, then we need to be looking at what are some of the gaps that can create more access, key parcels. And, you know, you and I have taken a walk recently on something that involves that. And then also related to parking. So if we're looking at, you know, that 10-minute drive is also the criteria, then, okay, if you have a 10-minute drive, well, but is there adequate parking, or where are people going to be parking if it's a 10-minute drive? And that also is related to what we recently looked at. So how are you thinking about those things?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think really the next step is, now that we have that walk shed map and kind of those criteria that we have defined as for what is public park land, what is safe access, we then can zoom in and say, okay, so everything in this walk shed, where are there gaps? And that could be a combination of looking at NCDOT data as well as working with Transportation Department to look at some of the work they're doing is updating the bike walk plan. And then we can also generate from, based off of where the land is and what tier it would fall in for access, we could do the same thing at kind of each tier, which is apply the access standard to the land as it relates to this, and then zoom in on those and make sure there aren't any gaps, or if there are, what they are, and figure out the solution to either parking or the direct access. I think, you know, especially as we get out of the urban core, there are a lot of parks that maybe have direct sidewalk access in, but that sidewalk access in shortly after you leave that park boundary. So there's a real argument to be made that that's not the most accessible either.
Right. And so you just touched on something else, which is how this has to integrate with transportation investments and planning, which also goes back to development. So, okay. And then how are we looking at things like trails because, for instance, the Durham Roxborough Trail planning that we're doing, we're looking at things like little parklets along there. And, you could argue that the trail itself could be considered a park, a linear park. So how are we thinking about things like that?
Yeah, that's something that hasn't really been accounted for yet because it's more of a case-by-case basis. The Durham to Roxborough Rail Trail is a great example. American Tobacco Trail is a great example of trails that serve as more of almost as destination trails, right? It's trails that people really intentionally go to that almost blend that gray area between just a simple linear trail and more of a park feature. I think what we could do is work with staff in other departments and within DPR to identify which trails those are and start to figure out ways to include them. Maybe trailheads that have public access parking could be included in the walk shed as well.
Okay.
I don't see any issue with that.
I think that's a lot of communities are looking at considering linear
Sure.
parks to be parks. Even being in other countries where they develop the median in the middle of roads.
Yeah.
And that's a park.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yes, so thank you for your presentation. You've made mention to the walkshed map several times. Is that
Yes.
publicly available?
Yeah, it should be on the last page in your memo.
Okay.
Yes, and we can also make that available as a web map and send that out to you all so you can zoom in a little more. I know it's kind of hard to see the entire county at that scale.
Any other questions, comments? Kabir?
I was just curious, looking at the watershed map and then comparing that to the Trust for Public Lands map for accessibility and how we should think about the intersection of those and if it's possible to kind of overlay those, because it looks like the area where the greatest need for park access is in the parts of the county where we have the least walkability. So how are you thinking about the intersection integration of those?
Yeah, so the Trust for Public Land, the park access map that they publish, it's a little tricky because it is taking into account more than just geographic considerations like access to parks. There are embedded demographic factors. So I think Sarah alluded to this earlier. The mapping tools that we're working on developing integrate a lot of the demographic data that Trust for Public Land has, and then separately includes the access data so that we can look at those things independently of one another and really dive into just access as a factor of its own, and then weight that with demographic information. I think the other thing to be mindful of with the Trust for Public Land is that survey goes to multiple agencies, not just DPR, and we only report obviously the facilities that we're responsible for. So it also does not necessarily take into account land from Triangle Land Conservancy, EQUA, depending on if Duke responds to it, the county, the state park. So it's also tricky to look at it year to year because sometimes they don't have all of the data that they need to really get at that. I don't know if that answered your question.
So I think. Yes, thank you. So
Mhm.
when I'm hearing that, be mindful that there may be some gaps in what gets reported through TPL.
Yes.
And that they have slightly different objectives than what you're presenting and working on to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, so I would say the criteria that we have developed and that is going through that process that we can ultimately bring it back here to the council is more reflective of our comp plan and factors that are hyper relevant to Durham and excludes some things that maybe aren't as practical to assess us on that they assess other cities on, like Washington, D.C., San Francisco. It's a very different environment, and we want to make sure we're doing apples to apples and making sure that the way we're assessing land is in line with our park system plan and the citywide comprehensive plan.
And so DPR will take into account state parks.
Yes.
And those other sorts of public parks and open space?
Yes, they are not included in our system plan as acreage that we control in terms of how that defines our offerings to the city. But when it comes to access, we absolutely do include it. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. And maybe somebody already asked this, but so I appreciate this. On council, we get this a lot with rezonings. And so that question on the comp plan policy and alignment. So how are we going to marry the two, I guess? Because it seems like there's and I'm a council member who's been like, I don't think it's quite frankly fair to ding an applicant for policies that are set by DPR with a real acknowledgement of limitation of resources, and that's real. And we often are asking, DPR like, hey, can we? And it's just not a priority of theirs, right? Because they're looking. That's their lens is not. I believe that they're the experts on what they're supposed to be doing. And so as a council member, I'm going to lean very heavily on what DPR is telling us to make my decisions. Because ultimately, as a council member, I'm essentially a generalist. I'm not an expert in any of these things. So just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, I can tackle that one. So two things. One, through the EAR process, we're going to update this policy in the comp plan to match the more recent adopted policy that is in the system plan. And so then our staff reports will reflect that as applicable. In addition, Austin mentioned briefly that, they're developing this tool by which in the development review process for a rezoning case, they will be able to assess and give us information about, is this, a high priority, medium priority, low priority? Does it meet the criteria that they've established, so that they can give us a more clear, like, yes or no, and we will figure out, we don't have all the details worked out yet, but we will figure out how to capture that in the staff report for you all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's helpful information. I guess secondly, and this has come up with a few of our cases, this is really park, but it is around open space, and I've raised it a couple of times. When we passed the place type map, we knew that this was going to be broad and it wouldn't be the details of a specific rezoning. But it's fine to say this should be open space when it's publicly held land. I consistently have real reservations when we have a private property owner who has not been told that their parcel has been designated open space in our place type map. And I will continue to raise that. I'm looking at attorneys. Since we were having this conversation on open space and parks, I really want us to look at what are those larger parcels that we have identified. And while I understand that that's a priority, unless the government has a plan on purchasing that land from those homeowners or from that property owner, I don't feel comfortable with saying you can't develop this because 75% of this parcel is designated open space in our place type map.
So, and I may ask Scott to chime in on how it is that we mapped the recreation open space place type. We have, I think, Scott, why don't you talk quickly about kind of the criteria that we use to identify, and then if you would, how the future city county open space plan might amend that.
There we go. So in the comprehensive plan, we tried to balance the kind of two very important goals of preserving environmentally sensitive areas through zoning and whatever means we have, and then understanding that people have the right to develop their property, and making something green on a land use plan does not preserve that or ensure that it's open space forever. So we tried to be realistic in what we designated as recreation open space, focusing mostly on what is likely going to remain in that state because of ownership, whether it's owned by the city, state, federal government, and private property that through existing regulatory tools would likely remain undeveloped. So portions of property that were in the floodway, which is almost all development is prohibited in the floodway, undeveloped floodplain properties, areas that have significant natural heritage areas, which we typically as applicants to preserve through the rezoning process. So we tried to avoid designating any complete property that wasn't owned by the government as recreation open space. There are some instances where that happened because the entire property is in the floodplain or the floodway, or so there are a handful of properties, I'll admit, Councilmember Caballero, where it is a private property and is designated as open space. That being said, we can't, our attorneys are glaring at me, we can't through the regulatory process say you can't develop anything on your property. So through the zoning process, we would have to allow, the new UDO process, we have to allow some development on those. And then as with the open space plan, which we are very soon going to be under contract and underway on that, we'll be talking about that to you next month. We will look at those properties, in particular ones that are designated open space on the place type map, to see which ones we should focus towards acquisition.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
would say one more last thing. And when you come across those in a case, it's really up to you as a council member to say, okay, the ideal probably would be open space, but we have to allow something on this property. So it's kind of a policy decision on you all if it is designated open space on the place type map, but the applicant is asking for something else.
Yeah, I think for me, what would be helpful is, and we have this, so I was the DOST liaison for many years on council, and I sat on DOST before I was a council member. So I think for me, and we did this, I know the county has an open space land acquisition fund, the city does as well. As we are doing that work, if there are properties that are held in private and we see as a high priority, we need to have the money to buy them. I don't think it's fair to tell a landowner or a property owner, even if you're like, oh, 75% of this parcel is designated on this map, if we're not going to purchase it, then we should not be telling them what to do. That is my fundamental opinion. I understand that may not be a popular opinion, but at least at this point, and it also just sets us up to have interesting conversations at levels of government I'd rather not have conversations with. So I think that's my main concern, and we have funds, and if that means that is a decision that council also needs to make, which is to increase the amount of dollars, then I would rather be told, you need to increase the amount of dollars, we need to find the money, and give folks the opportunity to have their land purchased at a fair market value. Thank you.
And
Yeah, great conversation. I would suggest that the city work with the county on that, because this is also a conversation Austin and I had on a recent walk, because the county, we have a fund that we invest, $500,000 in every year, $500,000. And that gives us the ability to respond when there are opportunities. It is often, I will say, that landowners actually come to us and they want to put a conservation easement on their property, or they want to donate land to be protected. We are very fortunate. And so we've been able to, because we have the funding and we have the staff, and I don't know what that would look like. I know we have a very small but mighty open space department, but we've been able to take advantage of federal and state funding for grants to be able to protect and purchase properties. So, staff is also an issue, but we've been able to acquire and protect a lot of farmland and open space, to your point. And with the development pressures in our community, and with what's going on, we have to be ready to act quickly when there is an opportunity. We have an example here locally for you all to look at for this, and I do strongly support that, being able to do that. I think I think every dollar that we have invested, we've gotten at least $4 return on that. So it is a very good investment.
Yeah, and the city does have an open space, at least we did, an open space person. And we have, I think it's 100,000 or 150,000 that we give every year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't, but I know that's not enough, right? But it was started a number of years ago. I'm no longer the DOST liaison, so maybe DOST can ask that as a budget request for those folks who are the DOS liaisons now. And I know City of Raleigh also does a lot of land purchasing in Durham County.
And the other thing I just want to mention is, in terms of what is on the map, I think what's going to be important is, for instance, we have 2 open space plans. We have the Little River open space plan. We have the East Durham open space plan. Once you have land that has been identified for open space, then yes, it should be on our future place type map. So hopefully we're going to have those designations come out of the plan.
Not to jump a month ahead, because I'll bring the
Yeah.
bring an update on the open space plan to you all next month. But that is one of the main priorities of the open space plan, to identify those areas and essentially kind of having 2 buckets: land that we already have in our inventory that we want to protect, and then look at the privately owned land that we can evaluate through the zoning process, and then looking at land that we can acquire to protect also. So kind of trying to build a fine line and looking at the land that we already have to ensure that it's protected, but also looking at new land and maybe beef up that that land acquisition budget. That's a goal. And then I'll ensure Mayor Pro Tem Caballero that in the plan there's a fiscal analysis to look at what we need and what we already have, and kind of look at how those dollars match up.
Great. So I've got a few questions. So one of my questions is about private open space. So when we think about the way the city has grown out, we developed neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods had parks. Eventually, we hit a point where we started developing neighborhoods without public parks and just kind of private open space, and almost like rings of a tree growing outward. That has now made it difficult to go back to the old ways, and setting aside also these requirements around stormwater and having an HOA that can maintain private open space. But it would now make it difficult to incorporate public parks into new neighborhoods for parks and recreation, because now you have to sort of cross a sea of neighborhoods that don't have public parks, that have private parks. And so there's a cost associated with that. So my question is, so these private open spaces, how exclusionary can they be? We're not counting them. If someone shows up and they're not acting the right way, they don't look the right way to an HOA, how exclusionary can they be? And I've firsthand experience, I've been kicked off of a private park before because we had a political meeting, and it was a private park and private streets. And so we were kicked out of the entire development by private police. So just wanted to ask that.
Yeah, I can't speak to the actual policies, because to your point, it varies by HOA, and often the practice of allowing or disallowing someone is complaint driven, right? It's not posted anywhere, but if there's someone in the park, they contact the HOA, I don't like this, and then it's kind of a personal level decision as to whether to ask those folks to leave. I can say that from our perspective, when we are reviewing a development that's proffering land or attempting to provide some recreation space, some of the criteria we're using to review that it's pretty explicit about how it feels. So things that, for example, recreational land that's in the back of a neighborhood, you have to walk through the entire neighborhood to get to, in front of people's homes. That doesn't feel comfortable for homeowners, and it also doesn't feel comfortable for prospective park users. So we're trying to discourage that. We're also trying to discourage proffering land to the city that is pretty much unusable, that is entirely floodplain or entirely protected, not because that land doesn't deserve to be protected. That's not the issue at hand, but calling that recreation space or an active space when we can't do anything to activate it is a little misleading. So I think a lot of what we see in terms of practices of exclusion really comes down to where they put that land and how they activate it within the development. It's not so much a policy issue at the HOA level, if that makes sense.
And these private lands, do they have the private open space? Do they have public access easements on them?
I have no idea. I think that's up to, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, that's up to the applicant. I don't think we can, if it's private open space, I'm not sure that we can require them to have an access easement abutting it or going through it.
Yeah, that's correct. Most are private. One of the things that we can look towards the future is if there are some that meet kind of the criteria, but maybe are, further out of the network, harder to maintain, that maybe if situationally they work, but they're of a certain size where we're okay with a private entity like an HOA maintaining them, we could entertain having a public access easement and then being, kind of marketed as more open to the public, but not burden DPR with their maintenance. So we haven't really crossed that bridge yet, but I think that is one of the things that we could explore in specific situations.
Yeah, I can give you kind of an example of where we've applied that recently. There was an applicant with a lot of site constraints, and they couldn't grant a trail easement wide enough that we could build and maintain it per our standards. So the agreement that we worked out was that they would build it, maintain it in that smaller easement, but they would put a public access easement over the entire trail profile along the entire width, such that it is publicly accessible, but for their development considerations, it's no longer a burden to us to try and have to build and maintain in a suboptimal condition.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think, my dream, when I was a staff planner a decade ago, I worked for a municipality in Texas. We required for every 100 units in a new subdivision, you had to have a 1 acre park. If it was 130 units, you had to have 1.3 acres of public dedicated park. And the requirement was it had to be centrally located and everything needed to be fronting onto it. So it really made this, it was almost subjective. And when we as staff planners were looking at the subdivision, we could say, no, you're not doing a good enough job of centralizing and really celebrating this public dedicated parkland that the developer constructed the park improvements. So just something to think about. I think that's important. And I do think that if we need to strike some sort of middle ground where we're not getting new public parkland in every new development in the future, if it has to be for purposes of maintenance and fiscal responsibility, parks and recreation, some sort of privately maintained development that is at least has the standards of a public park and also has the public access easement so that you can't be excluded for speech or kick off people who you just don't like. So I think that those are important. I think one, going back to what's the purpose of this? I think one purpose of this is, and this is in the comprehensive plan, is metrics, is measuring where we are, where we want to go, and the success and how we're getting there. Regardless of what we do around this information, I think having this information is important. And with that regard, I am interested in this idea of shifting from kind of looking at 10-minute walk to 10-minute drive in suburban area. Although what are we calling the suburban area? Is that just anything outside of the old
That's a
designation?
great question. That's something we want to actively work with planning on. It is not defined just because there are a bunch of different metrics that people endorse. Some people endorse population density, others endorse housing density as that criteria. That's something we're working with planning to define. And hopefully once we can define whatever metric constitutes urban, suburban, and rural, that can be mapped again so that there's a precise acknowledgement on your part and of the public as to where which policy or where which criteria applies.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because I think that's important because obviously there's a lot of land yet to be developed. I don't want us to have the low standards of 70s sprawl. I want us to go back to, if our goal is walkability, if our goal is actually walkability in practice, not just in commentary, then I think we need to be serious about that. And part of that is having the right metrics and measuring it the right way. I actually don't love the idea of measuring it differently, like saying that we're having success when we have a 10-minute drive in the suburban area. I also think that we need to acknowledge the realities, but I do want the message to be very clear. When we build in a connected, mixed-use, walkable way, you're daily needs and desires are much closer to you and can be more walkable. Just something that I'm wrestling with there. I don't know if I have, a clear answer or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point, and I think both the comprehensive plan and our system plan agree that that's the ideal. That's what we would love to have. I think the consultant team at the time felt like if we just strictly adopted that 10-minute walk, we were basically setting a goal for DPR that they would never be able to meet across that planning horizon, and that kind of felt unfair and like it didn't give them enough guidance as to how they need to progress to that goal. I think to maybe address it more at the policy level, DPR can collaborate with planning to figure out how that standard gets transcribed over so that it makes it clear that there are ideals that we have that we would love for you to meet, but this is more of the bare minimum. You need to be meeting this. This is our standard, but we also have a vision and an aspirational goal of a 10-minute walk.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah,
I
go
think that another way to kind of look at this is, incremental as kind of the suburban area starts to, inside the UGB starts to fill out with development. You're going to have maybe larger, sparser parks right at that 10-minute drive. And as that continues to urbanize over time, the parks will also fill in, eventually getting to the 10-minute walk. So I think of it as kind of an incremental step, like we're trying to get there, but this is what we can attain reasonably in the near future.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate all the commentary, and I know we've got more on the agenda. I would love to know, like we say that, and I think I've asked for this before, like 10-minute, like what is it? How dense do you actually have to be to do a 10-minute? Like we say that, but like how many units have to be on the ground for like just taking any region of the city? Because this comes up in our rezoning all the time. Like we had cases, we hear from residents, well, it's denser. Well, that's the point. Like that's the whole point of the comp plan, was anything on the inside of the UGB is going to be denser. And so when we have 10-minute, 15-minute, I would love to know, like, I mean, I live in a, and I was lucky, and I understand this is part of the city is mostly unaffordable now. I live in a community, I can get downtown in 20 minutes on a walk. I can get to 2 parks within 5 minutes of my house. And that's great. How much denser would we have to be out in Southeast Durham to achieve a 10-minute city, right? Like, I think that's, I don't think people actually understand, like does that make sense? People are coming and being like, well, we're not honoring the comp plan. And then they're saying, well, we don't want density. It's like, friend, you're not gonna get the park and the bus and the commercial if you don't have lots of neighbors around you. And so how many neighbors is that?
Yeah, so that's a really great point, and I think both DPR and planning would sympathize with that sentiment. So I think there's 2 ways to kind of go about that. One is we could look at our existing, so as part of this walk shed, each park has been assigned their own walk shed. So what we could do was look at the parks that have a larger walk shed and just get an average of housing density within that walk shed, just so you could kind of understand. But it's tricky because the network that it's built off of is actually about street density. And you can have high street density but low housing density, and you can have high street density with high housing density. So I think that's something we can powwow about, I think, and then get back to you. I think the other thing that we could also look at that might get to your point is on the other side of that spectrum of adding more parks is we could look at our average walk shed size and the land that is not within the 10-minute walk shed and give you kind of an estimate of how many parks it would take to fill that gap. Because I think that's another piece that's not, I think sometimes, especially the public, doesn't understand the enormity of investment and land it would take to get everyone there.
Thank you. That would be really, really helpful, because it's hard to, at least for me, like I need examples. It's what I always say, give me a picture to tell me the thing that you're trying to tell me. And that's quite frankly the average user. Like, let's be real. So, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Totally.
I know this item has gone on really long, but it is really important. I wanted to just, I'm looking at the Watershed map, and I know since we're talking about rural has been one of the criteria, which is really outside of the urban growth boundary. Just to clarify, the end, is the goal will be to include county parks on the map and also the state land or as well, just to clarify?
Yes, that's the intent. We
Yeah.
have already gotten most of that information into the map. We are working with Celeste and County Open Space as well as some of our NGO partners to make sure that it's exhaustive before we
Okay,
publish that again. But yes, that is the intent, is that the map would include both and also distinguish between the watershed associated with DPR land and the watershed associated with non-DPR land, but
Okay.
they would all be on one map.
okay, because like just looking at this, like
Yeah.
Little River is not on here.
Yes.
Little River Regional Park. And and the city and the county are collaborating on the new park in East Durham, which, you know, that's another big need area when you look at this. The
Absolutely.
south, what is it? The south, you know which park I'm talking about?
I do. I'm full disclosure, terrible with names.
Okay.
But I do know
I'm
what you're talking
having a
about.
senior moment, so it's not, I want to say, it's not South Park, South, well, anyway, it's a huge park,
South something.
South something, that the city and the county are investing in along near Falls Lake in East Durham, which is one of those park desert areas. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of follow-up items that I've heard. and We will include
Southland.
Southland. There you go. You got there
Okay.
before I did. We will include
Let
that
the record
updated
show
map.
Commissioner Jacobs wants everyone to watch South Park.
Okay, yeah.
No,
So I think, you know, we need to have a complete
Yeah,
plan.
we'll
Yeah.
make sure that updated map
Yeah,
comes back
yeah.
to you in a follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
A request to just add more work on the table. My understanding of the place types maps is that water is marked as open space, like the whole part of East Durham, that is Falls Lake. There's a few other water, Lake Mickey, Orange Factory Lake. I'd asked this previously, and I guess that ruling came down from the Biden administration that water areas should be included as the count. Is there any way to get that split up? Because unless you have a boat, you know, going out on a lake doesn't really count. So that way we could get a better feel for how much actual land we have for open space instead of land and water counting as the measurement for open space. Thank you.
So for the place time map purposes, they are the public lakes and reservoirs are designated as recreation open space. And really the primary reason for that category is to show areas in the place time map where there won't be jobs or houses, because that's where we have to provide services and that sort of thing. So I think on the place time map, you wouldn't, having a separate category for water or lakes wouldn't help you all in your policymaking deliberations. I think if it was important to you all for the analysis we do on I think that did come from the Biden administration, that 30% of the land in the county should be permanently protected open space. If it was important to exclude the areas that were in water, I think that is an option. But I think what we showed, we did that analysis about a year ago, and what we showed is we're fairly close. We still have a long way to go. If we remove the lakes, then we would have even longer to go.
What is the current percentage? I mean, if 30% of the county is supposed to be preserved or whatever for open space under the Biden administration, how much of that is water? Do you guys know? Does anybody know?
Don't know for sure. I don't know if we have accurate
Data.
um,
Okay. That'd be
Yeah.
interesting to know because like I said,
accurate
you're
geographies of the lakes.
basically discriminating against anybody that doesn't have a boat.
Right, thank you. Just a couple other comments here. Then we can move on, unless anyone else has anything else to say. But I think one of the reasons why this conversation is so important is because walkability isn't just about infrastructure and connectivity. and the design of our streets. It's also about the proximity of uses to wherever you are in any given moment, particularly where you live. And parks is one of those pieces, one of those uses. And in addition to parks, we need to look at many other kinds of uses. Can people walk to the grocery store? Can people walk to their jobs or walk to trains to get to their jobs? So I think, this is one really important piece. We've got Parks and Recreation here with us and working on this. And so all of your work is appreciated. The other thing I'll say is I've always learned the walk shed as a 5-minute walk. And I know that there are 2 cities in the United States that have achieved 100% of residents living within a 5-minute walk. So to me, a 10-minute walk, doubling that is already kind of a compromise. And so I think that's just something that I'm thinking about is, being thoughtful about how we are thinking about how far people will actually be willing to walk to get somewhere. I think 10-minute walk. I mean, there are a lot of other factors besides just distance. 5-minute walk across a parking lot, people will drive. But just something for us to be thinking about when we are considering how we can shift our city from vast majority of us driving everywhere to at least expanding the transportation options that people have. Boston and San Francisco. Any other comments? Thank you guys so much. Thank you for your presentation. The next item here is item 7 on the agenda. It's the new UDO update.
Good morning, Bo Dobrinsky, Plan Development, here once again to provide an update on the new Unified Development Ordinance. I've also got Lisa Miller with me, and they'll assist on an update on our engagement for the project. So you all have seen this slide several times, more than several, probably a dozen. This just showing how the project has been released and how we've engaged with the community, and of course how we've interacted with you all to some degree. Fall 24, zoning districts, a draft of the map, as well as a draft of the use table was released. Spring in 2004, we released a draft of our development standards, which would apply to all districts. This past fall, our subdivision and infrastructure standards, as well as environmental regulations, were released. And now moving into 2026, we'll be releasing administration section, and that'll be as a part of the full draft. So it will not be separated out as a separate module. It'll just be included with the full document. There we go. In regards to the adoption timeline, this slide represents some specific milestones and meeting dates per your request. We're finishing up the completion of the draft now. We'll begin engaging with the community and conducting outreach in regards to the adoption process with the community. I'll defer and let Lisa speak to some of the specifics on that in a moment. There's a special planning commission meeting scheduled for February 24th. There will be a second, the item, we expect it to be discussed and move forward on March 10th with recommendation. Special joint public hearing with both City Council, County Commissioners is scheduled in April, or to be scheduled in April. All of this with the anticipated adoption date to be in May, first week in May, having a work session item going over with both governing bodies with the UDO to be adopted. I will note that in addition to this, of course, as most of you know, or all of you know, we've gone through a presentation with county commissioners earlier this week, a big presentation tomorrow with City Council, going into details of most of the project. Again, not the entire project, as we're still wrapping some of it up. This project timeline, certainly with the April public hearing, with the May work session items, is contingent on the Planning Commission not continuing the item. So they'll have, obviously, we've accommodated 2 meetings for both public hearing and the discussion and their action, but just wanted to sort of daylight that for you all.
Thank you. At the December JCCPC meeting, I thought that there was clarification that we can basically tell Planning Commission that they can't continue it. I can't remember what was.
Yeah, so at the December JCCPC, we discussed, or you all discussed, the possibility of an expedited hearing, and we decided not to do that in lieu of, or you all decided not to do that because we were able to accommodate having 2 meetings for Planning Commission. In order to do that, we would have, the time schedule doesn't work because that would have to go before both City Council and County Commissioners prior to.
Okay, see, I was fine with the 2 because I was under the impression that then that's it. Like you get 2, we're not continuing it. The thing needs to be adopted in June of 2026.
I agree. If we're going to have 2 designated meetings for Planning Commission, we still need to stick to our schedule. You know, it's a really hard to schedule a joint public hearing with all elected officials on the City Council and the County Commission to get a date. And now we have a date set for that. So that date needs to be set in stone for April for the joint meeting for the elected bodies.
Yeah, we, at the last discussion towards the end, I think the notion of instead, staff perceived it as instead of doing the expedited hearing, which would preclude Planning Commission from continuing the item and being able to discuss it more than once. The notion that having the 2 meetings then takes that out of that realm. So we didn't proceed with that realm because those agenda items would have had to go in January. So we don't have time to do that now. So we are now in the realm of relying on the Planning Commission sticking to this schedule.
Thank you. I landed on the 2, but Councilmember Baker really wanted the Planning Commission to hear it twice, which I thought that was a fair request. And so that, to me, that was the compromise, is you get to listen to it twice, but you don't get to continue it. I just want to be real clear. There's going to be a lot of public pressure. Folks want this to go on and on and on, and I am not okay with that. The UDO is mapping to the comprehensive plan. The UDO rewrite is not an opportunity to relitigate the policy adoption of the comprehensive plan because people don't like it. This has been going on. We increased Pat Young's budget in, I feel like 2018 or 2019 budget to get the comp plan done. We are in 2026. We need to move on as a community and this needs to be put to bed. And so I just want to, this is the space to have these conversations. And I don't know what needs to happen, and I may be the only voice, but then you're going to hear me very loudly from now until we adopt in June that people are manipulating this process because they don't like the outcomes. And I understand that. The place that you have that conversation is in elections.
So if I could chime in and just say that, you know, legally under the UDO, if we were to designate it expedited, they could only consider it once and not twice. And so that took that off the table. I apologize if that was not sufficiently clear last time.
I was not clear on that, so now I understand.
I think that this is a good moment for folks to reach out to our Planning Commission and have conversations with them about the importance of, no one wants this adopted more than staff, let me tell you. But I think this is a moment where, you know, that kind of working together with the Planning Commission would be helpful.
I agree. I'm not concerned if we collectively come together, and this was the compromise that was struck. I think if we come together and speak to the Planning Commission, which we have appointed, and message that this was the balance that we struck here, and the expectation is that you will make a recommendation at the March 10th meeting, I think that they will listen.
we have our representative here from the Planning Commission, Sarah. So if you could make sure that you help explain the timeline to the commission. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, on this process and.
No, I'll read it all myself and try to reach out to everybody and make sure that we have any questions answered before the meetings. I mean, that's always, we try to encourage that with people sending emails to us, including anybody and the public. You know, please, you don't have to save everything to the meeting. You can email us ahead of time. We do read the emails, we get it, we listen to it, and then we can evaluate it and do our homework ahead of time. And that makes the meetings more efficient and try to move through this. We have a meeting next week where I guess I'll bring it up, the importance of doing the homework ahead of time. One thing I've been wondering about is why, and I don't even know if this is legally possible, why is it all just one big blob? Why can't we, I mean, and you only do it every 5 years or why can't you take it and put it like, this section can be done? And then the next year, something, you can't do it a section at a time. And then that way it would be more efficient. It would be updated more recent, more timely. No, it has to be one big blob.
All the different chapters speak to each other, right? There's going to be like hyperlinks in one chapter to another chapter. There's consolidation of items. There's really a lot of good information in the packet for the City Council work session tomorrow, if you want to take a look at that. But yeah, I totally understand the desire to like do one piece at a time, incrementally. But for a UDO, part of this is making the UDO more accessible and like more democratic for everyone. And the new UDO is going to be so much easier for ordinary people to just open up and understand than the current one. And to do that, it all has to be at once.
Well, coming from the pharmaceutical industry, there is nobody who has more paperwork to look at that relates to other things. And you have, you know, production records and you have logbooks and you have how to do this. And in the thing that tells you how to do something, you have a whole section where other things are referenced. And those also are reviewed on a 2-year, 3-year, everything is reviewed on a set schedule. It's all documented, what it references to. And so everything is linked and it's all reviewed instead of just going, oh, hey, you have to read everything once every 5 years. I don't know. It just seems like there should be a better way to be able to do it more frequently and maintain the linkages. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Sure,
So we don't have to worry about, you know, Planning Commission can't put it off, or you have to read everything.
Yeah, if I may, in addition to everything that Councilmember Baker just said, which I vehemently agree with, because we are implementing the place types and it requires new districts, it would be impossible to sort of incrementally or piece by piece, because you'd be referencing something that doesn't exist. So I think that's really one difference, is having those new districts, which in order to implement the place type map, we have to do that because there wouldn't be another way to translate that. So I think that in order to implement the place type map, it's the only way to do it.
All right, well, if you can send me the link to whatever package is going to you guys.
Can we send? Okay.
Could we, so this is going to be taken up February. Maybe what we could do is get this information to the Planning Commission, you know, as soon as possible, so that you all can start looking at it now or whenever. I mean, we actually discussed it at our work session yesterday. No, sorry, Monday. So after the city council looks at it, get it to you all so that people can have even more time. We're talking about January, right? For folks to start looking at it and asking questions, to your point. Yeah.
Ahead of time. And then my understanding is that the special meeting is the end of February, and then the meeting, the beginning of March is going to have not many items on it, and it's going to be specifically for the second go at the UDO, and there's not going to be other rezonings. Is that happening? Okay.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
The agenda for since the end of February is specifically a special meeting for the UDO, that the March meeting doesn't have any other agenda items on it. And it's also going to be only UDO to clear up questions that were asked at the February meeting. But I mean, is there a limit on time? If there are questions at the February meeting, and then they have to be resolved by the March meeting, which is only 2 to 3 weeks, is there a 30-day public notice? Is there some time limit? Or do we technically, if that's the case, then technically we have to have everything done and questions asked prior to the February meeting?
I think that goes back to Commissioner Jacobs' comment of getting everything to, and all that information, and your point, getting that point across to all the planning commissioners is, hey, look at it now. Start putting together your questions and your comments. Start talking amongst yourselves and submit those questions and comments. And then you're right, the timeline between the February 24th and March 10th is tight, but it's kind of what we have to work with.
I have another suggestion. I know this is a burden for staff, but we often do this at the county level, which is, not, violating the quorum for a meeting, but having the opportunity for, 2 commissioners to meet with staff. So that's another possibility, is for planning commissioners, what would be for you all 3 people? Is that right? Or how many, without violating open meetings law? Okay, so 3 people.
One with 8, so it could be 6 or 7.
Okay, so basically setting up the opportunity whenever it makes sense on that timeline for staff, planning staff, to be able to meet with small groups of planning commissioners, to also be able to ask staff directly their questions before the meeting. I think that I would suggest that as well.
Commissioner,
Just a process clarification. This is for Chair Shigaris. There was a subcommittee of the Planning Commission that began review parts of the UDO update back in September, October. I know they haven't received this full information that we're going to be seeing now, in work session tomorrow. What's the status of that initial review? How far did that get? Are there plans for that subcommittee to then be more deeply engaged and help bring it to the full commission? How is that sort of connecting in now?
We had a update at the December meeting, but the chair of that committee, Commissioner Ritchie, was out. He had just had a new baby. So it was just very brief. That subcommittee had been meeting with members of city staff and getting a deeper understanding of things. I will reach out to them and see if they have any specific questions, or perhaps have they asked you specifically, Bo, what's been going on in those meetings?
Yeah, so we met with them. We discussed went over the project and details at length. Obviously, we would be open to meeting with other members and small groups, as Chair Jacobs mentioned. It was really time well spent working with the subcommittee. Obviously, it's sort of the second version of the subcommittee that the Planning Commission has had over the course of this project. So yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say.
Then there's also subcommittees for DOST and EAB, I think, that have been working on stuff. So maybe they need to have some clarity around, here's the last ideal date to get all your comments and questions in. Yeah.
Is it scheduled for us in April already? Okay. All right. That's okay.
So could be, Chair Shigaris, that February 24th, if there are a bunch of comments and questions that can't be answered by March 10th, they could be answered by April or sometime before then. And even if not presented in a formal way, commissioners could get their questions answered, or if they have comments, incorporated into the EDO in some way.
I would suggest that we are proactive and maybe go ahead and schedule, a couple, 2 or 3 meetings with groups from the Planning Commission between the 24th and the 10th to try and work through questions, clarifications, et cetera, so that when you get to the 10th, the goal is a little more attainable to try and get a recommendation. I think that also there is space for, there will probably not be enough time for us to address everything necessarily. And so a recommendation with some, hey, we recommend 4, but we, also recommend these specific, edits or changes or whatever, and that moves forward. So that keeps it out of like the constant cycle. And then lets us, we do have a little bit of time there before we get to the governing bodies, just because of notice and everything, to make some additional tweaks. But that's my recommendation as a way to kind of make this all work.
What was the date for both county and city?
The joint public hearing is April 22nd at 7 p.m.
Okay, can we have calendar invites for that?
I thought the clerks were sending those out.
I don't have it on my calendar. Nope. I'm looking at my calendar. You're saying, what was the date?
And
April what?
Diana set it up, so I will ask her, I will shoot her a message and have her,
Can you tell me the date again, just make
April
sure?
22nd,
Yeah.
7 p.m. Yeah.
Nope. Doing that right. Okay, thank you. That's why I was, thank you. Okay, thank you for, I was like, what's going on?
Chair, I don't have a question about how we're proceeding, but I would like to make a comment. First, let me just say that I agree with the compromise that was brokered back in December, and so I agree with that. But I want to go on record and acknowledge the work of the Planning Commission. Sometimes there is not a value placed on their work that should be, and so I'm going to acknowledge that here today. The second thing I'd like to say is that the work that's done in that particular commission is important because our residents see it as the last barrier, or rail, I should say, for the policy deciders to decide. And so that's their opportunity to engage in a way that's a little different when it comes to the deciders having to decide. And so I value that. And in a perfect world, I would like for them to have an opportunity to have more involvement. But I just wanted to place some value on the work that's done there and its importance to our residents. And I want to say that I value that. Sometimes in these positions, it's not always comfortable, but it's not about being comfortable, right? And so our residents deserve to hear, or our residents deserve for us to hear whatever it is that they have to say with regards to issues that are important for the entire community. And so I just want to go on record and say that.
Thank you for those comments. I completely agree. Actually, everyone sitting here on JCCPC right now is or was on Planning Commission. Definitely value Planning Commission's work. I try to, from time to time, send them an email saying thank you for everything that you do, and respect the work that they do. So I definitely want us all to collectively show our appreciation regularly to the Planning Commission. When I was on Planning Commission and there was an expedited hearing, that kind of pissed me off when that happened, but it's understandable that it happens from hopefully just time to time. And this was, I think, a fair compromise, seeing a very important document twice. And that doesn't prohibit additional comments or commentary from planning commissioners, either collectively or individually, being able to speak and provide comments in other ways as well. So, but yeah, I appreciate those comments. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. As somebody who is on the planning commission and talking to people who were previously on it, being dissed for being volunteers, you're not paid, you're not elected, let's just bypass the commission. You're not experienced, but we are in fact all involved members of the community. And, like Commissioner Valentine said, it is our responsibility to listen to the people and take their input and do the best we can. Thank you.
Heard, and thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If there's no additional questions about the scheduling, which I don't think there are, I'll allow Lisa Miller to speak on engagement.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk Lisa Miller, Planning and Development Department. I'm going to talk briefly about the Module 3 engagement that was just finishing up when we met with you in December, and then talk about the shift that we're taking as we are moving into this public hearing and adoption process that we're just talking about the schedule for. So for Module 3 engagement, which again, it covered public infrastructure, streets and streetscapes, environmental protection, all those kinds of things. We took a similar approach to previous modules where we really tried to use our input mechanism as also an education tool. So you'll see on the screen here, connecting comprehensive plan policies. So what's in the adopted comprehensive plan that is relevant to this particular tranche of topics. How do the existing standards play out in our current UDO? How is the draft proposed new UDO different than what's existing? And how is it implementing that comp plan policy? And then also, as has been mentioned a few times with this project, so much of ways that we're making this more accessible is by the work that our consultants are doing in the kind of graphic examples. So including those, including opportunities for folks to give kind of a temperature check. How supportive are you of this direction after going through that kind of ladder of things? And then what additional feedback do you have for us for tweaks to this as we move forward to a full draft to move through the process? So similarly to previous modules of engagement, like the arrows illustration 2 slides back, for this module, we had in-person, virtual engagement, expanded office hours, lots of meetings with different stakeholders. Some of those folks have come up in conversation this morning, but BPAC, EAB, Farmland Protection Board, Home Builders Association, all kinds of different folks that we've been in conversation along the way and are continuing to do so this week and next, and as we're moving forward. So we are now, I just wanted to share a few highlights from kind of the results of that. We were able to collect over 1,300 survey responses, which is fantastic. And a huge, huge part of that effort was through the work of T.G. Allen and Associates, Dr. Tawana Allen, who's been managing our Engagement Ambassador program for the last 2 years. And the approximately 20 engagement ambassadors who collected the majority of those responses. They've been doing such excellent work, and just want to put our thanks to them on the record here, as well as continuing to tell them that. We had really good representation, which is what we find when we're working with engagement ambassadors. These are folks who are invested in our community, often embedded in folks who are underrepresented in local government. So we did have really great kind of spread of geography, age, gender, things like that. We did have we did not have any folks respond to our Spanish survey, which, if you all remember what's happening in our community, in particular in November, we were not surprised by that. We did still have 12% of our respondents who are Latino, Latina, Latine. So it wasn't that we didn't hear from that part of our community, even though it was a real struggle during that time frame in particular. We had 20% of the folks who responded who are in the 16 to 24-year-old range, which is awesome. 14% who identify as LGBTQIA, 20% who they or someone in their household have a disability, and 54% are renters, and another 20% who have some alternate living situation rather than renting or owning. So really great diversity of perspectives that we are getting from folks in this, which we're really excited about. And again, huge thanks to our ambassadors as we did that. So now moving forward, as we were all just discussing at length, we are moving into the public hearing and adoption process, which obviously is coming up very quickly. So our effort right now, some of you may remember when we got to this point with the comprehensive plan process, we really shifted our efforts to awareness. Like, we have this full draft. We want to make sure people know it, know what's in it. And we want to do our best to help people understand how the public hearing process works. So putting out information around, what are the details of like how you sign up and speak at a public hearing? When are these things scheduled? We have set up a special adoption process page on the website. If you just go to engagedurham.com/adoption-process, you'll get to where we're going to be adding links to the meetings, the recordings, the agendas, everything like that. So really just trying to focus our efforts on making sure people can funnel their input, their efforts into being part of that process, because we know it is a lot harder for folks to be engaged in that because it just feels like there's a lot of barriers. So that's our shift right now. We are doing, you'll see on the flyer there, we're doing the kind of regional branch additional office hours, again, just to kind of be available in different parts of the county again, so that it's a little bit easier for folks to come to us. We're continuing to meet with different stakeholders. I met with somebody from BPAC yesterday. We've got, public art folks next week, Farmland Protection Board. So we're doing those conversations as well, kind of recognizing at this point in the process, a lot of that will be coming kind of to the Planning Commission in the packet and at the meeting, because we want to make sure, those boards have a chance to vote on something and issue it, and given the timeline that will be necessary. So I think that we are also, in addition to focusing on that education, how to get involved in the process, we are still asking folks to give feedback on the map if they have that, and we'll be collecting that. So that'll be part of what we'll be bringing to the public hearings as well. So I think that is it on the engagement updates. And unless you all want to ask questions about that right now, I'm going to hand it back to Bo.
I just have a quick question. This is awesome about having increasing the opportunities for the chats. And by the way, your engagement through the past almost 2 years has been amazing. It really has. I dare to say, I wonder if there's any community who has had as robust a community engagement process around the UDO. I'm wondering, will we have hard copies of the proposed UDO at all of the libraries?
Yeah, that's a great reminder. We did that with the comprehensive plan, and we can do that with when we have the full draft, which should be later this month. We can get those. We've got a great relationship with this library staff.
Yeah, I highly recommend that, and making sure that people know
Yeah.
that there are hard copies available at all
Yeah, we can put that in
libraries.
the Engage Durham newsletter and the planning notification
Okay.
service, push that
Okay,
information
great.
out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that update. We still have a little bit more. You're going to go through administration. Okay, go ahead.
Almost there. Bo Dobrinsky again. As you all are aware, we've taken each piece of the draft and brought it before you and presented it to you. This is sort of the last article that you all will see. You may see some other tweaks, and updates as we continue with the adoption process. But as a body, this is sort of the end of each piece being brought forward to you. The administration section really is sort of the nuts and bolts in terms of how things work, codifying the administrative procedures, application procedures, particular permit requirements, which obviously there are subsequent permit requirements in terms of applications and checklists, but this is how all that's codified. Our zoning enforcement procedures, also how we handle nonconformities will be a part of this section. Many of the tweaks and updates, and I'll just go through a few of them here that were in your memo. Not all of them, sorry, Lisa. But we, removing references, old references, outdated, or defunct plans, and advisory bodies that may no longer exist, correcting all of the departmental name references to align with recent reorganizations and department name changes, modifying our application requirements for site plans so it's a little bit clearer on what's required in terms of level of work proposed and level of improvements required. Also, you'll see, or you may have already seen, the change of the name from Unified Development Ordinance to Land Development Code. This is obviously needed to minimize confusion as we move forward with two versions of an ordinance. You'll probably still hear us say new UDO quite a bit when engaging with the public, right? Because we don't want to change our message halfway through the process, but obviously moving forward, Land Development Code will be the name of the ordinance. And that's really it. Obviously, if you all have any questions about this section, admittedly, this one being the last one, still some tweaks and changes probably as we further refine some of the sort of application processes. But this, I always say it's not necessarily the flashiest section, right? But this is where a lot of we spend a lot of our time when we're reviewing plans, as this dictates a lot of applicability. And that's all I have.
Questions, comments? Any? I welcome the change from UDO to LDC. I can't even describe how many times I've heard like Unity Development Code or like what are we unifying? That's
Yes.
and with regard to engagement, staff, I think I'm not afraid of making critiques, but I think that this engagement really is some of the best that I've seen for a code process. That's a huge number. The number you present, the 1,300 of just for the fourth module. I mean, that's amazing. It really is. So kudos to you on that. And obviously your engagement is so important because this is however many hundreds of pages. We know that the devil is in the details. And if you delete one sentence, it could mean nothing or it could mean everything. And so really it's about the messengers. The planning department is in the weeds on this. You all are the ones who have the power to create the message of what this is actually doing. What is the takeaway for the public? And so yeah, it's a big responsibility to be able to message that all accurately. So that is the end of that agenda item, and that completes our agenda for today. Any final comments from folks? Yeah.
Just a couple questions. So just to clarify then, in kind of the parlance of this process, the administration section, is that considered module 4?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then just understanding, the engagement that has already been done, the hard work that's been done both by Planning Commission, EAB, DOST, and just our residents who sought to educate themselves and engage in this process. As we think about the weeks to come before we close this, what are the level of potential changes we can anticipate from what has been proposed thus far in the 3 modules that have already come before this body? I'm a new member, obviously. And when we get to the end of the process, like what should we anticipate there?
So that's a great question because obviously we'll continue to hear, we're going to EAB tomorrow and obviously the ones Elisa already referenced. And so we'll continue to hear, and there may be minor tweaks, refinements after Planning Commission. We plan on any changes that have been made or will be made to bring them forward to you all sort of in the interim. But don't expect any major shifts. To be quite frank, we expect probably minor tweaks here and there to better implement what's already, what you all have already recommended or that we move forward with. So I don't expect any substantial modifications between now and adoption, unless of course directed otherwise.
Okay, thank you. And is EAB tonight? Will you be coming this evening?
It is tonight. Oh, I said tomorrow.
Yes. And I'm just curious too about whether, in perhaps some of the more formal input processes through our appointed boards and commissions, will there be feedback to those boards and commissions about the input they provided and what was decided to be included versus not of their recommendations and some why? Perhaps it's a forum like this evening, right? When you go before the body and they have that chance, sort of what is that back and forth communication process with those bodies?
Yeah, Councilmember Kovac, I really appreciate that question because I literally just walked over and spoke to Robin about this exact topic. So as Councilmember Baker said, there's subcommittees that many of these boards and commissions have, and we've received feedback and we've had a lot of very valuable ongoing back and forth communications, oftentimes either through the presentations at their meeting, but also offline, one-on-one conversations like Lisa discussed. And one of the things that we've really tried to do is, say, yes, we can make that modification, that's a great recommendation, or no, we cannot because, sometimes it's prohibited by law, sometimes it's something we're already doing in another section, and so we've been really, really thorough and transparent in our communication, our ongoing back and forth with each of these bodies. And what I had mentioned to Robin earlier was, much like we will with the engagement with the community, showing how that communication played out with you all in terms of what we heard and what changes we were able to make based on that feedback, so that you have that as a part of your decision making.
Thank you. Can you just let us know, just like by email or something, that when it's like going live, the full draft, just as JCCPC? Because I have had lots of folks ask me like, when's it going to be done? When's it going to be done? And then, yeah, that would be, because I need to print it too. Like I'm old, y'all. I still write, like I need to print it. Yeah. Well, I'll just say they've done some studies. You do better writing than typing. You remember more. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just gonna say that. Anyway, so I know because yes. What'd you say? I missed what you said. Oh yeah, there you go. So yeah, that was just so we know, I will be damaging trees and printing the whole thing out, and I apologize for that.
Oh no, I'm forgetting what I was going to say. Yeah, I would just like to say that as our county liaison to both BPAC and EAB, I have seen firsthand how rigorous the engagement has been from our boards and commissions, very engaged, and with Robin. I mean, really, EAB, I think it was like pages and pages and pages of recommendations, and also with BPAC, also so there has been incredibly serious and rigorous exchange. We have such amazing boards and commissions in Durham and expertise in addition to the Planning Commission, that have really had input. And also, I have seen our staff be very responsive. So, and I know, you know, Chair Baker is on AAB with me. He has seen that as well. So, oh, okay, now Matt, okay. But you know, you've seen that as well. So, so I just wanted to share that, but also, related to the process, I mean, each of these, you know, which you will see on your agenda today, the staff memo about the UDO references every single time a part of the UDO has come before the JCCPC. It has a link to the memo, a link to the video, but also I'm assuming this has also happened with the Planning Commission. Have they been briefed on all of the modules as they have come up as well? Or how has the Planning Commission been briefed or included in the
Yeah, so we've made multiple presentations to the Planning Commission. I don't remember if it was with each module or if it was scheduled based on another timing factor. But we had, and it has been some time since we did this, but we have, you know, when the districts were released, we sat down with Planning Commission and went through the district and the standards. We've had follow-up, but I don't think it was the same cadence.
Okay.
We have had just high-level overviews. So as far as I know, so people can do their homework ahead of time, email links to all of it, to all of them. And then we can go ahead and push, or I can go ahead and push and say, hey, please look at all of this as you can ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else, guys? All right, well,
But I really,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
There's one thing I wanted to mention that is a huge effort that is related to the public hearing process that you all may know, but I just wanted to mention really quickly. So we are putting together signs to put out all over the community, but we've identified 20 to 30 locations that are designed differently, hopefully catching people's attention about the public hearing. We're sending out notices to owners and renters across the entire county for both public hearings, which is a huge effort. Our admin team has been stellar, and there's so much that goes into that. And we're so that and doing a half-page ad in the newspaper. So just wanted to let you all know there's also all of those things that we're doing for the public hearings specifically. They're not engagement, but are trying to help get the word out as well.
Is it like yard signs you're putting out?
So it's like the zoning signs, but designed specifically for this project. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Are they bilingual by chance?
So they have the notice on them about how to, like it has both the ADA and the language access notes on them in English and Spanish.
Is there, and we may not have budget for this, but I know PB runs social media ads. I don't know if it's worth doing that, but you might want to talk to participatory budgeting. I think that was one of their main, they went over their goal of residents voting, and I think that their social media ads probably helped do that.
Okay, I can find out. I know we've worked with them on their Spanish Facebook page for the city, but I can talk with Carmen and folks to see what we can do.
I've heard some comments from citizens about, I don't think they completely understand that all emails and public comments are an official part of the record. And that's why maybe they wait until the last minute to come to all of the meetings and say what they have to say there, or email their stuff in like the day before. I don't know if part of the public awareness campaign can be like, hey, the emails you guys send through and everything it's somewhere in the public record for reference. You don't just have to wait to the last minute. You can come to the meeting and speak. It's your right. We still have freedom of speech in this country. But the fact that maybe reiterate that anything they do email through is received and is permanently preserved.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we have a little how to stay involved in the adoption process flyer that we adapted from our comprehensive plan process. And it does specifically mention emailing comments ahead of the public hearing to both the Planning Commission and the governing boards. But I think that's something we can call out in some of the notices that we put out specifically as well.
And
if I could just add that, just for clarification, we are mailing a letter to every single property owner and resident, right, Lisa? Like tenant, like.
Yes.
Yes. So that everybody will get one. It is costing us to the tune of over $120,000 just in letter notices. So we had to have a special budget ask last year to put that money in our budget to do this. So everyone is getting a letter
That's
for the public hearings.
for all the public hearings.
Yes.
Kind of all at once.
No, we'll do two separate, because legally we have to notice the public hearing at Planning Commission separately from the one that'll be a joint one in April.
We should make sure to post our letters when we get them so folks can say, I didn't get one. Well, I did. So just so those of us who have robust social media presence, because I think it'll help affirm that, yeah, we all got letters. It's important.
Yeah, everything that you all do social media wise, other things to like help people know about this, we super appreciate.
Anything else, y'all? All right, well, just want to say thank you for electing me chair. As part of this, I think we're really going to be focused on the UDO over the next, until it's adopted. I can't imagine we're going to have capacity for significantly more than that. And of course, we've sort of served as a de facto steering committee throughout this process, and we are on the home stretch. So that's going to be continue to be a big focus for the first half of the year. But I do just want to say to each of you that I hope that if you have planning ideas that you feel very open to bringing them here, bringing them to me, and we can discuss them. Same goes to you, Chair Chagaris, that I hope that you're a true liaison, that you don't just feel like you're taking stuff from here and taking it to the Planning Commission, but that you're taking stuff from the Planning Commission here and feel empowered to bring ideas to this space as well, so that we can work through them and think about how we can do good planning. And then I will be, of course, working with you, Director Young, to set the agendas for these. So again, just doors open, and if you have good planning ideas and thoughts, studies, anything that you have on your mind, please feel free to bring it. And with that, we are adjourned at 11:17. Thank you all so much.